taking a day or two around the holidays to slow down and make homemade cookies. It's one of my favorite ways to get into the festive holiday spirit. And today I'm making a ton of cookies, starting with Italian Anise Cookies. They have an anise and lemon flavor with a glaze on top, followed up by everyone's favorite Chocolate Crinkle Cookies, because they have this brownie-like texture and they last for days. Following that, I'm gonna make my favorite cookie, the Christmas Wreath cookie with tons of almonds and spices, and last but not least, soft gingerbread cookies. And I'm gonna show you how to make an easy chocolate bark that you can pretty much flavor however you like. So we got a lot of baking to do. Let's get started with the Italian Anise Cookies. Now this dough is made in the food processor, comes together in a snap, starts with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And to that, we're gonna add half a cup of sugar. All right, so to this, we're gonna add some baking powder. We want 2 teaspoons and half a teaspoon of table salt. Now we're just gonna buzz this together, mix it all up. Next up, the butter and the shortening, which I'm keeping chilled in the fridge. 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 4 tablespoons of shortening, cut into 1/4-inch pieces. Just gonna sprinkle this over the top. We're gonna pulse this in until the mixture looks sandy. It takes about 10 pulses or so. You can see how the texture of the flour really has changed. It looks like sand, really. And we used butter for flavor, but the shortening is all for texture. It'll give that really flaky texture in the cookie. All right, in go 2 eggs. Whole eggs, crack them right into the food processor. There we go. Now for the flavoring. A little bit of vanilla, teaspoon of vanilla. Now we're gonna add some anise extract. And this is the real flavor of this cookie. It's an anise cookie. Teaspoon of anise extract. And some lemon, about a teaspoon of freshly grated lemon. I'm gonna grate it using this rasp grater right into the food processor. All right, that looks good. Now, back the lid goes on, and now I'm just gonna let it rip 20-30 seconds until the mixture forms a dough. That's perfect. You can see it's come together as a nice big dough with just a few crumbly bits. I'm gonna dump it into this bowl, get all the bits from the corners. Now, if it's nice and crumbly, just wanna give it a knead or 2, if you need it, just if you need it. Just to make it a nice cohesive dough, really doesn't take much. All right, now time to make cookies. These are relatively small cookies, which are my favorite because it's just 1 bite. About a tablespoon of dough per cookie. I have this handy portion scoop, which is exactly a tablespoon. It's gonna help me make perfectly sized cookies. Not only will they look good, but they'll bake at the same rate, which is nice too. So I'm just gonna portion them out. This makes about 32 cookies or 16 cookies per tray. All right. Now that all the cookies are portioned out, and you'll see I pretty much do this all the time. I portion the cookies and then I shape them. That way I make sure they're all the same size. Now I'm just gonna go back through, make sure they're nice round balls. This dough is a dream to work with. It's almost like Play-Doh. All right, last one here. In the oven these go. They both can bake at the same time, 375, about 15 minutes. Of course, I'm gonna switch and rotate these trays halfway through. You can tell the cookies are perfectly done when they're cracked on top, firm around the edges, and the bottoms are nice and golden. Now you gotta let them cool on the baking sheet for 5 minutes, then transfer them to a wire rack and let them cool completely before glazing. The glaze on top is a very important part of this cookie because it looks cute, but it also adds a ton of flavor. Easy to make with 1.5 cups of confectioner's sugar. To this, we're gonna add some lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice, and a little more anise extract, just 1/4 teaspoon. I know, if you've never made a glaze like this, it doesn't look like a lot of liquid, but it doesn't take much to turn the confectioner's sugar into a nice glaze. Now you can make the glaze thicker or thinner by just adding a few drops of water. I like to have the consistency of school glue. Ooh, that looks like the perfect consistency. Now to glaze the cookie, I just like dunking it right into the glaze. Let it drip off. There we go. All right, so I have a few done, and while they're still wet, I'm just gonna sprinkle some colorful nonpareils on top. And you wanna do it while the glaze is wet, obviously, so that they'll stick. And I see people do all sorts of things. I see people using a lot of yellow, like yellow sprinkles, to denote the lemon flavor inside, but I can't get away from all the color. 5 down, a few more to go. All right, here we go. A few more sprinkles. Now we just need to let this glaze set 20-30 minutes and we're good to go. The cookies are cooled. It's the flavor of the anise and the flavor of the lemon, and together they're brilliant. The texture of the cookie has the butter flavor, but it's nice and short thanks to the shortening. So onto the cooling rack they go, and we can get started on the chocolate crinkle cookies. Love what you're watching? Take your cooking to the next level with our Essential membership. Get instant access to thousands of recipes, tips, techniques, product reviews, and step-by-step videos. Our members app allows you to search by ingredient, set dietary preferences, and save your favorite recipes. For those looking to level up, our newest feature, ATK Classes, offers more in-depth instruction led by ATK experts, so you can gain greater confidence in the kitchen. Start your free trial by visiting the App Store or going to americastestkitchen.com/YouTube today. Time to make everyone's favorite cookie, the chocolate crinkle cookie. Not only are they serious lookers, but the flavor is deep, dark chocolate, not too sweet, and it has this fudgy brownie-like texture. Starting with the dry ingredients, here I have a cup of all-purpose flour. To that, I'm going to add half a cup of cocoa powder. I love myself using dark cocoa or Dutch processed cocoa because it has a deeper, richer flavor and darker color. All right, now to this, we're gonna add some baking powder. You want a teaspoon of powder, a little baking soda, 1/4 of a teaspoon, and half a teaspoon of table salt. All right, that's it for the dry ingredients. Now moving on to the wet ingredients. Here I have brown sugar, 1½ cups of brown sugar. To this, we're gonna add 3 eggs and 3. Now, this next ingredient is optional. You don't need to add it, but it adds a killer intense flavor. So it's not optional in my house. It's a must add. It's instant espresso powder. And you know, a lot of chocolate recipes call for it because it just enhances the chocolate flavor. We're gonna add a whopping 4 teaspoons of it. 4. And last but not least, some vanilla, a teaspoon of good vanilla extract. And you just wanna whisk this together. Make sure that espresso is nice and dissolved and the eggs are all broken up. Okay, now the last piece of this puzzle is some actual chocolate. This is 4 ounces of chopped unsweetened chocolate. And this is the 60% cacao stuff, so it's got some good flavor. I'm gonna add 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Now we're gonna melt this in the microwave. 50% power, takes 2 to 3 minutes. Now, every so often you want to go in and give it a good stir. That way it just melts nice and evenly. Right, just want to stir it, make sure it's absolutely smooth. All those bits of chocolate and butter have been melted, but it's not too hot. That's the whole point of 50% power. Not too hot and you don't scorch the chocolate. All right, now this chocolate mixture is going right into this egg and brown sugar mixture. All right, that looks pretty good. In goes the flour and all that cocoa. And just take my time to fold it in, not really for the sake of the texture of the dough. It's more not to make a mess because that cocoa, once it gets airborne, if you stir it too vigorously, it goes everywhere. You can see it's barely a cookie dough at this point. It almost looks like a brownie batter. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna let it sit for just 10 minutes. And during that time, the cocoa and the flour will absorb a lot of that moisture and make it scoopable to be a cookie. So after a 10-minute rest, we can get to shaping. This cookie dough has sat for 10 minutes and it has firmed up so much, but it's still very fudgy, which is why I like wearing gloves. Now the key to getting that crinkle top on the cookie is to use 2 sugars, granulated sugar and confectioner's sugar, or 10X. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take 2 tablespoons of dough. This scoop makes it very handy. Gonna drop it into the granulated sugar to start. Then you wanna make nice balls. Then you roll it in the powdered sugar, and it's that 1-2 punch of the 2 sugars that make the cookies look so beautiful. All right, into the powdered sugar. Now you want to get a good coating of powdered sugar. All right, onto the cookie sheet it goes. You want to give these cookies some good room to spread and do their thing. So you fit about 11 cookies on each sheet. Into the oven these go, 1 tray at a time, 325 degrees. They bake for about 12 minutes, but of course, I'll rotate the pan halfway through. And while those bake, I'll shape the rest of the cookies. These cookies are such lookers, but the real proof is in the pudding, right? How they taste. So fudgy and chewy. Everybody loves these cookies. Look how fudgy that is in the middle. That is a good crinkle cookie. But we still have a ton more baking to do. Back on the cooling rack these go so we can make the rest of them. Time to make my favorite holiday cookie, which is an almond wreath. It's actually a gluten-free cookie because it's just almond flour, a whopping 4 cups of almond flour. And the spices that are added to this are just incredible. Starting with some fresh orange zest. You need about 2 tablespoons. Normally that would take 2 oranges, but with this Mama Jama, I think we can get 2 tablespoons out of this one big orange. It's almost the size of a grapefruit. Obviously I've washed the orange so you get nice clean zest. All right, that's about 2 tablespoons, which is good. Now for the spices, starting with cinnamon. A teaspoon of cinnamon, teaspoon of ground ginger, half a teaspoon of ground cardamom. Oh, and that's the flavor with the orange that just gets me. And a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna add the weirdest ingredient to this recipe, but it makes all the difference. This is finely ground coffee, not instant espresso. Finely ground coffee. I actually took the coffee that I brew every morning. I ground it just a little bit more finely, and you want a tablespoon of this. Now, you don't taste the grounds, you don't taste the coffee in the final cookie, but it just adds this deep, rich note that if you leave it out, you'll miss it. Now whisk this together. Notice I didn't add any leavener. There's no baking powder or baking soda here. That's because any of the lift in this cookie is gonna come from egg whites. So here I have 3 egg whites. We're gonna start to whip them and make a bit of a meringue. Now the recipe doesn't call for this, but I never whip egg whites without adding a pinch of cream of tartar. It's just insurance that the egg whites will whip up nice and fluffy. So starting for about a minute, the egg whites have gotten foamy. Time to crank up the speed a bit more and wait till we get nice billowy mounds. Then we'll start adding the sugar. It's time to add the sugar, 1½ cups of granulated sugar. I can tell by how the whisk is leaving streaks in the meringue that it is perfect. Always looks a little goopy, but you can see it's holding its peak right as it sits there. That's perfect. Now we're gonna add the extracts. We're gonna add some almond extract and some vanilla. 2 teaspoons of almond and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. All right, we'll whip those in. Perfect. Take the bowl off the base, over to the board we go. I'm gonna fold the almond mixture into the egg whites. So we'll add about half. There we go. Oh, the spices. It's just so soothing. We should make a candle out of this is what we should do. Add the rest of the almond flour mixture. There we go. All right, now as I'm mixing the last few bits of flour in, I'm gonna add 1 more ingredient, and that's 3 tablespoons of orange marmalade. All right, now you can see the dough is not coming together in the bowl. That's on purpose. We're gonna knead it just a little bit right on the counter to make it into a dough, but I'm gonna spray the counter with a little baking spray just to prevent it from sticking. So onto the counter go most of the dough and any of those crumbly bits. I'll spray for my hands. You just really wanna bring the cookie dough together. You just wanna knead it for about 20 seconds till it's a nice cohesive dough. Now, we're gonna divide the dough into two, roughly equal halves. We're gonna wrap each half in plastic, and it has to be refrigerated for at least an hour, but you can do this easily up to a day ahead. This cookie dough makes a ton of cookies. Out of each half, you get 20, so 40 cookies total. Perfect for the holidays because you like having a lot when you're giving them away as gifts. Now, you don't have to portion the dough out like this, but I'm kind of a dork. I like to bring out the scale, and I know because I've made this dough so many times that each cookie is about 25 grams. Now, by no means do you have to do this. The dough really isn't that fussy, but that way they all bake at the same rate. And so I'll portion it all out and then we can shape into wreaths. All right, now for the shaping. You can flour the countertop if it gets a little sticky. What you want to do is take each one, you want to shape it into a log, 5 inches or so. That's good. And then you curve it into a wreath. I like doing a couple of wreaths at once and then I garnish them with the almonds. The other thing about this dough, it is really forgiving. If your wreath cracks a little bit, you can just cobble it back together and re-roll it out. All right, now for the garnishing. Here I have some egg whites, 2 egg whites. Just whipped them up so they're a little foamy and broken up. I'm gonna take each wreath, dip one side in the egg white and right into the almonds. Press firmly, and there you have an almond wreath. And transfer it to the baking sheet. All right, that's it. Now I'll just continue to do the rest of this batch, spreading it out over 2 baking sheets. So it's about 10 cookies per baking sheet. So rolling we go. Into a 300-degree oven, both these trays go. 20 to 25 minutes. Of course, I'll switch and rotate them halfway through. And you know they're done when they're firm and they're a light golden brown. Once they're baked, you have to let them cool on the baking trays for 5 minutes, then transfer them to a wire rack and let them cool completely. These cookies are cooled and all they need is a little powdered sugar. It's more for looks than anything. Although these cookies really aren't very sweet, so that little extra sweetness is nice. I also love how it makes a ton of cookies, so that if you're making cookie boxes or you're having a big dessert buffet, there's plenty for everybody. Oh, doesn't that just look like a sweet little wreath? You taste the almond, but then you get the orange, and then just all the spices. It just tastes like Christmas. I don't know how else to describe it. We have one more cookie to make, and that is gingerbread. They not only have a great flavor, but you can cut them out into all sorts of shapes. I like stars and snowflakes, and I'm gonna use a little glitter.
We'll get you right back to the video. Check out Cook's Country's newest book, The Complete Cook's Country TV Show Cookbook.
Over 16 seasons and more than 600 recipes are condensed into this cookbook, jam-packed with every recipe we feature on the show, plus stories, tips, and reviews.
Go on the road with Cook's Country and tour the U.S. through food. Get inspired by dishes from restaurants, regions, and chefs all over America.
All in this one convenient cookbook.
To order your copy of the Complete Cook's Country TV Show Cookbook, scan the QR code or visit cookscountry.com to continue your Cook's Country journey.
One last cookie to make, and that is gingerbread. Now this is a chewy, soft gingerbread, and it's a rollout cookie, so you can cut it into different shapes. Easy to make in the food processor. Starts with 3 cups of all-purpose flour. And I want to note that I like using unbleached flour because I think it tastes better than the bleached stuff. Gonna add some brown sugar, dark brown sugar, 3/4 cup. Now for the spices, because gingerbread is all about the spices. We have some cinnamon, tablespoon of cinnamon. There we go. Tablespoon of ginger, wouldn't be gingerbread without ginger. Some ground clove, 1/2 teaspoon of ground clove, which is actually a lot because ground clove has a strong flavor. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. and some baking soda. That's 3/4 teaspoon. That's it for the dry ingredients. Just gonna pulse them together. Make sure it's nicely combined. All right, now in go the liquids. Here I have 12 tablespoons of unsalted butter that are melted and cooled. We're gonna add the molasses, key for a gingerbread cookie. This is 3/4 cup of mild molasses and a little bit of milk. Just need a little bit more moisture, 2 tablespoons. Now we're gonna let this rip until a dough forms. I might have to stop it to scrape it down every once in a while. And that's it. Easiest dough ever. Now, I'm gonna put it on the counter. I'm gonna knead it just for a little bit, bring it together as a cohesive dough. And I'm gonna spray the counter with some baking spray just to help prevent it from sticking. It is a very wet dough. This is the cookie that will make your whole house smell wonderful, and your neighbors will know they're about to get a little treat. Just kneading it a little bit, creating some gluten, making sure it's a nice cohesive dough. Now, I'm gonna deviate from the recipe a little bit because back in the day, old recipes, you would make a dough like this, you would chill it and then roll it out. Well, recently, we found you could actually roll it out now and then chill it, and it just makes everything so much easier. So that's what I'm gonna do. Although both ways will work. Put it between 2 sheets of parchment paper, and you just wanna roll it out to about 1/4 inch thickness. Yeah, when the dough is nice and fresh and warm and right out of the food processor, it just rolls out like a dream, and you can really just nail the thickness of the cookie. Let's see. That looks pretty good. All right, slide it onto a rimmed baking sheet. We'll repeat it with the second piece of dough here. Top with another sheet of parchment. All right, so now that the dough is all rolled out, goes into the fridge. You have to let it chill at least an hour, but you can do this up to 24 hours in advance. This gingerbread cookie dough is nicely chilled. Time to make cookies. Working with one at a time. I'm gonna remove that top piece of parchment. Now you can use whichever cutters you like today. I'm using snowflakes and stars, which feel festive. Start with the stars. And it's just so easy to cut out cookies, especially when the dough's been chilled like this. I like it when they stick in the cutter because you can transfer it right to the baking sheet. Trying to maximize my surface area here. Pull these out. Now the beauty with this dough is you can re-knead it and roll it out as many times as you like. Now you can wait and fill up another tray and bake them together, or you can just bake them as you cut them, which is what I'm gonna do today. Now, they don't take very long to cook, only 10 minutes, 350-degree oven. And you know they're done when they're nice and firm on the edges. Into the oven they go. All the stars and snowflakes are baked and cooled. I let them cool on their sheet pans for about 10 minutes, then put them on the wire rack so they can cool completely before we decorate. So I'm gonna make a glaze, and this glaze has a tablespoon of cream cheese. That just gives it a little flavor, a little heft, and a little more opaqueness. So to this, we're gonna add a little bit of milk, 2 tablespoons of milk. I like mixing the milk and the cream cheese together to get all the lumps out. Right now I'm gonna add the powdered sugar, about 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. And of course you add more milk if you want it a little thinner. For this, I like it a little on the thicker side, almost like school paste, a little thicker than glue. That way it just sort of stays in place a bit better. All right, now I'm not super fussy about decorating. I like my cookies looking, homemade. Also, fancy decorating is not my thing. So here's my go-to. The first are just some stripes. You just drizzle right over each cookie. All right, my other go-to is simply covering the top as best you can with glaze. I like using a spoon for that. You just dop a little glaze right in the middle. Then you use the back of the spoon just to spread it out. I don't go all the way to the edges. You can put sprinkles on these. I also like using a little turbinado sugar, and it just reinforces that brown sugar flavor. All right, I'm gonna leave some plain. I always like a plain gingerbread. Now, for the snowflakes, you gotta up the ante a little bit. I mean, they're supposed to be sparkly and everyone's a little different. So I'm gonna glaze most of them, and we're gonna use a little glitter. For the glazing, I do the same technique, drop in the middle, push it out to the edges. This is edible glitter, obviously, which you can buy online. You just kind of sprinkle it on, and then I shake it around a little bit to really cover the snowflake. It's just fun. Sometimes I glitter without the frosting. You just kind of spread it around and make a glittery star without the extra sugar. That's fun too. I'll just finish decorating these gingerbread, and you have to let the glaze set for at least 30 minutes before you can taste them. Look at all the cookies we made today. I mean, this is an impressive spread. If you did this for a dessert buffet, or you made boxes and gifts for neighbors. And as I promised, I finished up with a little chocolate bark, which is not only incredibly easy, but you can flavor it really to suit yourself. All you have to do is know how to melt chocolate. Now you want to melt the chocolate in a really specific way to make bark, because you want the chocolate to have a nice glossy sheen when it's cooled. So to do that, you take 12 ounces of bittersweet chocolate that you've chopped up, microwave it at 50% power until it's mostly melted. It takes about 2 minutes. Then you want to stir another 4 ounces of chopped bittersweet chocolate into the melted chocolate and keep stirring and mashing the chocolate till it's all melted and smooth. While it's still fluid, pour it out onto a parchment-rimmed baking sheet, spread it out with a spatula, and then you can press in whatever you want in terms of flavors. But today I'm going to use some chopped white chocolate, some pistachios, and some freeze-dried raspberries. Now, using your hands, lightly press all those toppings into the chocolate and let it sit at room temperature for about 30 minutes. And I didn't even try the gingerbread yet. Ginger, molasses, and no, you can't taste the glitter, but you can taste a little of the cream cheese in the glaze. These gingerbread, they're delicious fresh, but they actually hold for days, as do many of these cookies, making them perfect if you're doing a buffet like this, like a dessert party, or if you're packing them up for neighbors, teachers, and friends, either in little bags or boxes. Hope you enjoy. Happy holidays. If you're ready to take your cooking to the next level, head over to americastestkitchen.com and get a free trial of our ATK Essential membership. While you're there, you can sign up for our free email newsletters and download our app. So, what are you waiting for?